Hey, everybody. I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks, here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, talking about all things technology, media, and telecom. This week's Next TMT Talks looks at Verizon finally getting California approval to buy Frontier for $20 billion because it reinstituted the DEI policies the FCC took out. I guess this would be check and checkmate. Elsewhere, we look at the state of the Disney Star Wars franchise with the departure of Kathleen Kennedy, the only chief it had ever had in the Mouse House, as well as Disney's eye-popping attention from a set of Avengers trailers released over the holidays. At Netflix, Ted Sarandos commits to winning in theatrical exhibition, while Matt Damon grouses that he and Ben Affleck had to tweak their script for The Rip to keep distracted mobile users from still paying attention. Quarterly earnings today for the Big Red Inn, and three guesses what everyone's going to want to talk about. It's Wikipedia's 25th birthday, and they could use some help. Please give. So, too, does the theatrical exhibition business, though Sarandos's comments will help. At least 2026 looks promising, according to a new study. Sundance starts this week with an interesting doc on all the questions we should be asking about AI, but aren't. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth wants to know why he can't use Anthropic's Claude AI tools to commit war like he
War!
was. Finally, Looper Insight says Paramount Plus's Landman, is the most merchandised show of the month, and that's a good thing. Whether you can quite figure out where the chewy scripts are going is another thing altogether. With all that, let's get started quickly. Dan, you opened the newsletter this week, which came out today also, with a little conversation about the California Public Utilities Commission putting back in the things Brendan Carr and his highly politicized FCC took out.
Well, I don't know if they were direct replacements. They were things like promises from certain companies, specifically Verizon, to recruit from diverse pools in local universities, education funds, things of that nature, stuff that involves supporting disadvantaged young people. Whether it was a direct replacement, questionable, whether it was sizable. I mean, none of this was in the tens of millions of dollars.
But to be clear, it's also state level only, which shrinks what it is versus all 50 states, right?
It is California specific, but it does require Verizon to do some things that the FCC probably doesn't want it to do. California Public Utility Commissioner said specifically the FCC and Brendan Carr can't replace us. They can't do this, basically. So it was a direct offset. It was a politicized move to counteract what the FCC has done in terms of limiting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And any regulatory approval, you have to show that contrition. You have to abolish those rules, at least so far. Every company that has gone through that process is submitted to that. And it's
but just to be clear, what you're saying is the CPUC did a politicized move to counter what it sees as a politicized move.
Exactly. What I think is interesting is you've got Charter buying Cox, you've got Netflix trying to buy Warner Bros. Discovery, and because of the competition issues for stuff that goes over the wires, the CPUC will probably be involved in that too. And you've got this sort of culture war stuff front and center, and stuff like consumer pricing and market competition and all the things that are probably more important variables, or definitely key variables, kind of pushed to the backdrop. Thought it was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about that because you're right. So it's always been about, are we maintaining fair competition and access to technology for everybody? And with the DEI policies that they put back in, access to jobs. This is not a huge deal. 20 billion is not nothing. Verizon's buying the upstart Frontier, which I think is 3 million customers in California. So it's a significant provider in this state, and I think 24 others. So it's not nothing. But it's a smaller scale thing, but you're right that it's worth tracking how California, which under Governor Gavin Newsom has said that they're really going to be essentially setting up kind of a alternative state, a regulatory regime and stuff like that to minimize some of the impacts of people like Brendan Carr. And it's going to be interesting how that plays out if Congress, particularly if there's a big change in control in the 2026 midterms, or if anything gets done before the midterms. That's the big question. If there's going to be something that comes along that tries to put federal preemption in place, for instance, on some of these things, et cetera, et cetera.
So yeah, it's 3.3 million Frontier broadband subscribers across 25 states. How this impacts them, it's bigger than California, but you've got powerful offsets in terms of the regulatory bodies of California and New York. Whenever these big mergers come up, it's something I think you've mentioned before. It certainly came up a few years ago when Sprint or T-Mobile bought Sprint. California and New York were very influential in that process. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah. And the state's attorney general have been pretty aggressive on some things. I think California's Attorney General Rob Bonta has finally filed suit against Elon Musk's Grok AI tools for the non-consensual sexual material, including those of apparently what look like children. He filed suit against them when the FTC and the U.S. Department of Justice were like, oh, look at that. That's kind of interesting. Can we use this in our war fighting? Because that's really what Pete Hegseth cares about. Anyway, we'll see more of these tussles between the largest state, the fourth largest economy in the world, and the country that it's part of, I suspect, going forward. Speaking of the state of things, as I wrote, a great disturbance in the force. Star Wars president Kathleen Kennedy, a historically great producer involved in things like Jurassic Park, was the right-hand person for Steven Spielberg for a long time, helped co-found Amblin Entertainment, went over to George Lucas. A few months later, he sells the place to Disney for $4 billion and a couple of nickels. And she maintained control of Lucasfilm from then on. She delivered some good things or some profitable things. Like they probably made back the $4 billion they spent just on the final three Star Wars films of the original 9 that George envisioned. And they did some additional things after that. And they've had a couple other wins. The Mandalorian, massive win. They're going to have a new movie based on The Mandalorian that's coming May 22nd, I think, though I'm not so hot on the trailer. And they'll have another Star Wars film next year, probably. Though these things have sometimes under Kathleen, they would start out with some cool auteur director who would then be beheaded with a lightsaber, and they'd stick in somebody else to fix the mess, and it either would die or it would hit the theaters with the force of Jabba the Hutt as he falls into a pit of whatever they are down there.
My son is a zealot, a Star Wars zealot, and he hangs out with other Star Wars zealots.
Is this number one or number two?
This is my oldest one who's in school right now. He's an older student, actually 23, I'll admit it, but he's getting it done when he's not watching Star Wars. And he's been talking about Dave Filoni taking over Star Wars for about 5 years.
And Filoni, to be clear, has been there as the chief creative officer. He's been there almost as long as Kennedy, right?
I don't know. Mandalorian was his idea to sort of serialize it and tell more niche stories, I think, appealed to the fan base more than things like The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker.
He was brought in to do the animated series, The Clone Wars, which was kind of actually a pretty good animated series that filled in some spaces between a couple of the trilogies, if I remember, a couple of the movies.
Like nearly 20 years. Yeah, I think they did it for Turner Networks, and it was fantastic. Cartoon Network, as I recall. And this, I think, where Kellen developed his fascination with the series was not through some movies, but through those weekly animated shows.
And they were really because the movies that were coming out weren't doing it. I got to tell you, I remember the original ones when they came out and waiting in line and all that stuff. People were like, "What the hell is this?" In 1977. They haven't had that kind of Star Wars force for a while. Under Kennedy.
10 years ago, people really reacted well to that first J.J. Abrams feature, The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I couldn't see why. It was narratively repetitive to me and kind of convoluted. I didn't like it as a movie. I liked the subsequent other two less, or one, I guess, the one that came out a few years ago, Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
So I do think on some level, the curation of the motion pictures fell short creatively.
Yeah, and they put him on hold for a while because they really stiffed with the Han Solo picture, Han Solo as a younger dude, because they couldn't get Harrison Ford out there anymore. That one didn't work. It was a miss. Andor was great, but incredibly expensive. It's Tony Gilroy, a fantastic writer of spy thrillers. I mean, a guy. He did the Born Identity stuff. I think he did Michael Clayton. He's great, and he was behind Andor's 2 seasons, but it was a $25 million per episode show, so it ain't cheap. So anyway, but a great show. So there've been some things.
I don't know what to look forward to in the Star Wars universe. There's tons of content. I think the zealots like my son are really dialed in, but I feel like, is there a major tentpole coming? What's next? I mean, it might have been financial, as you said. The movies made a ton of money, so this franchise might be doing quite well, and I just don't know it. But as a zealous fan myself, who's perhaps out of connection with the thing, what is the state of the thing? Why did they depart with Kathleen Kennedy? Was it fan reaction? What happened there?
Well, there's been push by fans for her to move on for a long time, but to me, part of this feels like she's at a place where it's not terrible for a great producer who was not necessarily a great studio executive, and those are different skill sets, to move back to being a producer where she'll no doubt once again be great, particularly at a time when the guy who clearly was flying cover for her is about to peel off, Bob Iger. And at that point, all bets are off. But don't get it twisted. Star Wars is still generating so much money. I mean, famously, when George Lucas had this little movie and Fox was going to distribute it, they didn't even think it was going to be their best movie of the summer. It was some romantic comedy or something. And so they and he's like, oh, keep the merch rights. They're like, sure, fine, whatever. It's not going to be a big deal. Billions of dollars. Yeah. Billions of dollars later, it allowed him to go spend $1 billion.
Young filmmaker out of USC, he's got American Graffiti under his belt, and he's still in his 20s, if I'm not mistaken. He doesn't have kids yet. How did he know this? It's an impressive feat on his part.
Well, and I just want to point out that Star Wars Billions, the merchandise thing really took off with Warner Brothers and Batman, and just a little bit later. And that was the first first franchise to hit $1 billion in merchandising, if I recall. But Star Wars came along pretty well, I mean, because they were still figuring out. And Fox didn't. Fox is like, hey, we don't have a park. We don't have pajamas. We don't, we're not doing Star Wars TV shows for the Fox network that hasn't been launched yet. Whereas Disney could take that stuff and wring every nickel out of it. And Warner Brothers could wring many nickels. They didn't have a park either, but they had agreements over time with various parks, so on and so forth. So it took a while for the merchandise to take off. Fox just didn't know what that stuff was back then. And now Disney sure does. Boy, did they ever. Speaking of which, over the holidays, they dropped 4 trailers for the next Russo brothers Avengers movie, because it turns out you make $2 billion Avengers movies, 2 of the 3 or 4 biggest films in the history of film. Disney might want to do more films with you. Who knew? And so they dropped some trailers. They only dropped them in theaters during Avatar, the latest Avatar screenings, and some other stuff that was sort of the right audience to drop them for. They didn't even put them online until a few days after they hit theaters. But of course, all the fanboys, all the people that are essentially franchise cousins of your son, copied it, recorded it all on their phones and put it up online. And they say they've gotten 1 billion views of these 4 trailers, which is stunning. They're just teaser trailers. The last one, which we include in our newsletter, it's like 30 seconds, but it's like this little hall of fame. The 4 trailers, like this hall of fame of characters. Robert Downey Jr. comes back not as Iron Man, but as Dr. Doom. I think people are looking forward to that. Doom was Snark. What's his name who plays Captain America? Steve.
He played 2 characters. Yeah, I'm not going to be there, but I suspect it's a mass audience phenomena.
Yeah.
These things may have peaked a little bit, but they'll still do plenty of
great. And let's just switch to Netflix. Ted Sarandos has a big interview with the New York Times as part of their charm offensive around the sale. And it's pretty interesting. The big thing is he commits to a 45-day window. He says, if we're going to be in the theatrical business, and we are, we want to win. So we're going to give you a hard number, 45 days. That's what we're going to do. And that's what we're going to be. And we're going to be there. And that's
45
good
days is
news.
how long he's been
That's,
narratively out in the marketplace trying to explain this merger.
yeah.
Now, this is,
Yeah.
I like the way he sort of existentially described it. It would have been reckless not to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the funny part was it's like we saw their books, we saw what they had, we realized how much better they would do in our system, in our ecosystem. And we also realized how better our ecosystem would do with them in it. That sort of both ways benefit is really interesting comment for him to make. That still didn't stop Matt Damon from going on Joe Rogan and saying, Netflix makes him and Ben
Yeah,
Affleck now people who make movies for
you have to
them like
restate the
this.
plot 3 or 4 times. Have you seen The Rip?
I have not seen The Rip. It's $100 million movie from those guys. I
Joe
got to tell
Carnahan.
you, Joe
If you
Carnahan.
want gritty, tough guys from the East Coast, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are solid actors who can do it all day long. I
Right.
perused
And
it the other
Carnahan's the
night.
kind of director to do it with him, right? I mean, he's that kind of guy.
I thought it was a kind of it's sort of an intricate plot where you're trying to find the bad guy. It's a little bit of a not who done it, but who bad. And you have to sort of suspend without spoiling it. It requires a lot of suspension of disbelief and kind of it's a little bit over the top.
Well, The Rip has a lot going on, and they had to repeat it multiple times because apparently there are enough people watching Netflix movies on mobile, and Netflix certainly knows what device you're using to watch their show, and they know if you're paying attention or not, to be frank. So there are people like, oh my God, Netflix is so heavy handed. I'm like, no, Netflix knows what its audience is doing, and it's just trying to make sure they stick around to the end of the movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the audience numbers, I suspect, will be really great. You enjoy it in the privacy of your home. You put up with a few flaws to watch. The acting performance is still great. I still thoroughly enjoyed the thing. But I want to caveat that Netflix, it seems to get a sort of a margin of error in these movies. You don't expect the same level of premium narrative, but you feel like you came away with value. And I think that
okay.
the price of making it work globally, price crossing so many demographics, you have to maybe sacrifice a few things.
Yeah, something's got to give to get to 4 quadrants, and not only 4 quadrants, but 200 countries where you're distributing it. And God knows how many languages they're in, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. So some forbearance here, I think, is worthwhile, though it made a big headline. The big news, though, for Netflix is going to be, by the time everybody sees this or afterwards, Netflix's new fourth quarter earnings, which they will report on Tuesday. As Kevin Simpson, longtime regular on CNBC, put it, it's really all about the post-game presser, the earnings call, where I'm sure all the they don't really care about the nearly $12 billion in expected revenue or the 26% rise in revenue per share. It's all going to be what's going on with the deal, right? I mean,
So that investor video will be closely watched.
no doubt. We have a link, I think, in the newsletter to the investor call. It certainly will be entertaining viewing.
I took it
Not as
out
good as
because
the
we're
Rip.
over.
Not as good as the Rip, but perhaps they will repeat. Perhaps they'll go over the plot line 3 or 4 times for all the people watching on their mobile. I wanted to note, and I did in the newsletter as well, that this is the 25th. Today, I believe, is the 25th birthday of Wikipedia. And this is the great shared resource, the effort to create some sort of consensus embrace of reality and this weird thing called facts that has gone back and forth between thousands and thousands of volunteers over a quarter century. And it is endangered just as much as facts are, thanks to all those disingenuous hucksters, some of whom are prominent politicians, and their statements of fake news and their sort of alternate realities. Wikipedia is a resource that has been invaluable in helping us move forward, and it has its flaws, no doubt about it. But if you use it, think of it, throw $25 in. Think of it as like as I put it, an annual subscription to the real world. So I just want
Get the next TMT first, but after that,
well, we got to check information
here.
somewhere. So
I've always found their information fairly spot on. I mean, there have been instances of high-profile instances of mistakes early on. This is a decade ago when it used to capture more of the zeitgeist.
Right.
But it's an invaluable tool. I have firsthand experience working for it. I was in PR about 15 years ago, and one of our clients who did motion picture research wanted to be profiled on Wikipedia. And had to explain to him it's not really a profile or a
Right.
news release. It's actually about you, flaws and good things, and just the truth. It,
Right.
I kept writing it. He would write it for me. We'd submit it. He'd get kicked back. They never accepted it, and I
Right,
always
because it was
thought,
probably too
"Oh, you
positive without any sort of alternative outside voices, third-party voices that are not just his PR representative. So I'm sure
right."
you were very good. This week, Sundance starts. I happen to talk to a filmmaker behind Valerie Veach, behind Ghost and Machine, which actually debuts in about a week. There is a documentary about all the questions we should be asking about AI, which threatens to overtake and
It's gonna be
replace.
fine.
It's
It's
going to
just
be
gonna be
fine.
it's gonna die out.
To quote Trump in South Park, hey, take it easy, guy. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Relax,
I'll sue
guy.
you.
I'll sue you. Relax. Yeah, that. So, but it was interesting, and you mentioned this, Pete Hegseth, apparently grumpy that while Grok makes both really unproblematic, unfortunate stuff featuring what may be children having sex or things that look like it pretty easily, it also makes war. But Anthropic, which is, by the way, the hot thing, both code tool and their new co-worker tool are the hot things right now. It changes every 3-4 weeks, it feels like. But right now, Claude Code and Coworker are the ones. So one to write code that's actually getting really pretty good, and Coworker to help organize things like renaming all this junky stuff in some file folder you have and make your life, Dan Frankel's life, easier. So he can't, however, use it to make war, which upsets our Secretary of War.
Yeah, he was
Have to do
speaking at
everything with an exclamation
Starbase.
point. I'm sorry, what?
Elon Musk. He was Hegseth was at Starbase, Texas. That's Elon Musk's big rocket facility in Texas. It's a
Right.
city within and of itself. I guess now call it as a city name. And he was talking, sort of talking about the new Pentagon philosophy for acquiring technology, all through one person. It's all focused. It's all, he mentions the word war at least 700 times in a 30-minute discussion. But at one point, he talks specifically about AI, and he mentions models that won't let you fight wars. And he's, according to Semaphore, referring directly to Anthropic, which wants him to slow down in terms of using their AI models for things, with the viewpoint that they're not ready.
Right, but in Anthropic's defense, they were a bunch of former OpenAI people, largely, concerned about the pace of headlong development by Sam Altman, the OpenAI operation, despite its very elevated talk about AI for all of us and all that. And they wanted to create an alternative that was just as capable with some guardrails on it. And that, to me, is a very worthwhile goal, because we kind of need to have tools that don't just blow us up. But it doesn't make the man who's all about blowing things up happy. So there's that.
Yeah,
Maybe he can do some kettlebell stuff. Kettlebell. Let's
East Asian Oceania.
Yeah. So, but speaking of Texas, Paramount Plus's Landman, the most merchandise show. Is that the actual term from our beloved sponsor, Looper Insights? The most merchandise show of December?
Streamer of the Month ranks the amount of digital visibility you have as a streaming company and for your content. They rank titles and they rank streaming platforms. Landman captured the most visibility across tvOS platforms, digital stores, ATV interfaces, etc. They also took a look at in a report this week on the Super Bowl, looked back at Tubi, where it got its major visibility in the places like Samsung's OS.
Right.
And,
Tubi was the first place to do a free stream of the Super Bowl.
Anyway, Landman is still blowing up. I talk to people every day who I wouldn't expect to watch that show.
Yeah.
Who never talked about Paramount Plus series with me before. But I got to tell you, I'm not the only person who noticed that season 2 fell off the rails. Just
well, let me just say, there was a great piece, I think, in The Guardian, and it had a really great point. It says, Sandman is not a good show, but it's a great show to watch. And their point was,
It was. I agreed
no,
at
no,
one
no,
point. I
no, no,
really
no,
liked
stop. And the point was they throw a lot of stuff up there. Like there are random car crashes in there. Like there's a scene in partway into I think maybe it was season 2, but this semi truck is coming. It's driving at night. It comes through on private land where it's supposed to be, just hauling butt across Tommy Norris's company's land to an oil well. And there's a guy at the rig in his pickup truck. I don't know, maybe huffing ether. I wasn't quite sure. It runs into it. There's an explosion. It's like very spectacular. And then nothing happens ever after that. I mean, it's like,
They investigate.
okay. I was like, well,
No, there
what
is an
was that?
investigation. Return to the scene.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's
but
like,
there was no, and then there was the hydrogen sulfide leak, which kills some hunters and nearly kills some crew guys, and one of them gets maybe losing his life. But we haven't heard about the blinded oil worker for a couple. I mean, these things, he drops these narrative crumbs. Hitchcock would be driven insane by this. And I'm not saying Taylor Sheridan, who is a fine, incredibly prolific screenwriter, is Hitchcock. But he would talk, he would talk about the MacGuffin and
Sam Elliott as the father. There's a vast complexity between Billy Bob Thornton and his dad, and you've got the son with his, and you've got the female characters are just so over the top, one dimensional. Ainsley, the daughter, Michelle Randolph is the actress,
right? The 29-year-old high school student. Well, she's going to college.
They have
now.
her as a kind of a bimbo most of the time, and then she pipes up to make sort of an anti-PC declaration in the most recent episode. And Ellie Larder's wasted. She's just like this crazy sex pot wife to Billy Bob Thornton. It could be more than it.
Well, but I don't want to, I mean, but there are two other female characters that are interesting. So one's the bulldog attorney, Rebecca, whatever her name is, and her inadvertent relationship with somebody that she was working with.
He managed to turn her into a sex pot. She has an affair with that guy.
They gave her some personality besides these ferocious, here's what I'm going to do to you if you move forward with this really ill-advised decision. She does that, and she's a bulldog. But then also the son's Latina girlfriend, fiance, she's interesting. She's got a family. She's got cultura. She's
Paulina
got
Chavez,
stuff.
that's the actor.
Yeah, Irina Chavez. Yes, exactly. Yeah. She's actually the most dimensional of the female characters.
The son, Cooper.
Yeah, Cooper.
Jacob
Cooper
Laughlin.
Norris. Yeah.
The first season he comes on with this, sort of gritty 70s Texas look with the old
it's
style
a Texas
tech hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit. They need to kind of develop these characters. It started out really interesting. Demi Moore, she plays John Hamm, who departed. He was Tommy's boss at the oil company.
The owner of the oil company.
Demi's now the widow. Cammy Miller, she plays, who's this sort of quietly fierce lioness who's going to save the company. But I feel like she's so stiff in that role that it's just kind of painful to watch. I just feel like they're getting nothing out of these actors these days. And I feel like there's just too much going on. Like you said, there's so much going on that they can't tie up the loose ends. Anyway.
But again, people are watching, A, and B, they're aware of the show. And at a certain point, it's like you're just complaining that Dynasty's got 50 million viewers or something. It's like,
just
okay, it's cheesy soap set in Texas, and you don't want to go along for the ride, don't go along for the ride. But it's like complaining about the wind. Look, dude, this is like complaining about the wind blowing in West Texas. And as a former resident of West Texas, who has driven a lot of the mileage that these guys drive, I got to tell you, A, it's pretty true to that region. The West Texas, I was further north, but it's pretty true to the people of that place and some of the weird mayhem that breaks out. And also just the being in the oil patch. I was more in the natural gas patch to the north, but a lot of the same people, same kind of sensibilities, same wildcatters, independent oil companies doing just hanging out there on the edge, half a step or 3 bad drill jobs from disaster. So I get all that.
No, listen, it's an industry that we kind of pulled in a really kind of visceral way that we don't really, we all use that product, and this is how It's
Right.
taken out of the ground and manufactured. This is how risky the job is. A lot of that stuff is kind of new to television. I think exploring parts of American life. I think Sheridan has really succeeded in that. That's, I think, part of his formula.
I will absolutely
So
say that they are right on two things, two core things that Tommy Norris holds forth on and holds forth on. One, we really depend on oil, whether we like it or not, and all our alternative energy efforts are great, but inadequate to cover the voracious demand, particularly now with AI,
doesn't mean he gets
that
to
we face.
inform everybody. Like,
No,
that
no, 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 no,
soliloquy
no, no,
over.
no. No, no. It's fine to remind us that we're all energy pigs, okay? All of us. That's fine. And
It
you
is
don't
fine.
want to hear, and A, but B, the fact that they equate it with drugs, which America also has a boundless appetite for, and finances all those cartels that are now financing the oil exploration business that Tommy Norris is getting involved in, is kind of perfect, but also an equivalency that I think is useful for us to sort of think about, right?
Speaking of rough patches, did you happen to watch Caleb Williams get out of one and throw a touchdown pass to tie the game in an epic
Of course.
divisional playoff game last night?
It was a
My God, that
USC
was
Heisman Trophy winner against the local Los Angeles team. Of course, I'm watching that. Just
the
saying.
week before. The Chicago Bears played the Green Bay Packers on Amazon, generated an audience. This is for the wild card round of 31.1 million viewers. It's a record streaming audience. Just like 3 weeks after Netflix set the streaming record with a regular season late game, this is a regular season game. Just these streaming companies are having just massive audiences. Now, the Bears are kind of America's team this year. Everybody, they haven't won in a long time. Williams is exciting.
New coach,
People have really tuned in to how
who knows how to do offense, which is crazy for the Chicago Bears. It's great. I think it's interesting that we've had these streaming records go bam, bam so fast. And I'm sort of curious about any thoughts you may have about what that is. It's the NFL. And I think what it is NFL fans finally went, oh, this streaming thing's actually okay. It's a pretty good experience. I'm all right with it. I like the multiple broadcast feeds I can drop into, and I like Amazon making it easy for me to buy a jersey, and I like, all that stuff I think is part of this. Just guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of linear QAM cable, I mean, I'm not saying the way of packaging TV, the pay TV model is, you said we're dead, it's dying. But I think getting it through traditional proprietary interfaces like your cable company, just through their wire and only their wire, I think that practice is dead. Even the cable companies want that to end because it takes up a lot of their broadband.
Right.
I mean, people are really comfortable with streaming. That's a good conclusion to come to. The NFL is probably over the moon with these things.
Well,
but yeah, the quality.
You're about the NFL. I just want to say, if they were really interested in reopening those contracts early before, these two records, they are triple double over the moon about, I think we need to open these maybe in 2028, maybe late 2027 to see what's out there. So
that said, as we record this thing on this Monday night, we are missing in Indiana currently beating Miami.
Yeah, it's 10-0 after halftime.
I kind of came to the conclusion that Indiana's not going to lose this year. So I when we decided to keep this thing on schedule, I decided, I demurred from watching the game. I'll catch the fourth quarter, but it does seem kind of anticlimactic. Oregon, Ohio State, some of the big behemoths that were supposed to challenge Indiana are out of the way.
Well, let me just say, really well funded, really well established with gigantic NIL money, resources, and all the rest. But it was funny because I happened to catch the president of the University of Indiana on ESPN this morning, and with the Pat McAfee show, which I don't normally watch, but I was getting ready, as you can tell from my backdrop. We went up to our cabin in the mountains, and I'm surrounded by lovely 110-foot pine trees. But before we left, I just had it on in the background, and she was kind of talking a little bit of smack because they were saying Indiana has the biggest alumni base of any school in the country, which I didn't know, like 800,000 people. I mean, they've got some money makers, like an engineering school, a very good business school. As a former associate dean of the USC Business School, it's probably not as good as they're in the ballpark, but it's a very good business school. It generates a lot of money. They got law school, they got a bunch of stuff, and a rich alumni that can put money into things like, oh, we play football now. Who knew? We just remember Bobby Knight and things like that.
Yeah,
So
Bobby Knight's been gone for a while.
he's been gone for a while. It's been a while. They've had a bunch of pretty good coaches go through and get washed out in the basketball side, and God knows how many people. Lee Corso back in the day had a few good years, and folks like that, but nothing like this.
I'm just saying, I could see them be deciding we're now we want to be a blue blood. We want to do that.
Right.
Miami was always great at football. Howard Schellenberger, a kind of innovative coach, colorful guy in the late 70s,
Jimmy Johnson
kind of made him that way. They had a
Schellenberger
series
put him
of
on the
kind of great coaches.
Schellenberger put him on the map. Then Jimmy Johnson took him to the next level, and he went off and won a couple of three titles with the Cowboys. So he's one of the handful of guys that did a college natty and a Super Bowl win. So they had.
And
a
listen,
good run,
if you're going to do it, now is the time, because of the playoff and the sort of the primordial ooze that college football finds it in, unseemly as it is to its hardcore fans. If you're gonna commit to it, do it now, because I think that we've talked about this before in this space. There's going to be a relatively small cadre of sort of schools have committed a lot of money and a lot of resources to doing this, and then there's going to be everybody else who's going to maybe go back to playing college football. These other schools, if you're in this club, you'll play this sort of hybrid college professional game that will be high stakes, high money, high ratings.
I'll just call it a professionalized college game. Let's call it that, a professionalized college game. These are the guys with real world prospects.
The college Super Bowl is on right now, and I didn't hear a lot of buzz about it today. I didn't feel any desire necessarily to really tune into it. My team's not into it. Mm-hmm. I do wonder how it's going to do. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of pressure for it to culminate into something big, but it's on a Monday night.
Yeah, I think that two things. It'll be interesting to see how it does. It'll also be interesting to see how it does in comparison to the 4 or 5 NBA games traditionally on Martin Luther King Day, which are on Amazon this year, and how those do on a new streaming outlet against the college football championship. So kind of something to watch. I'll just throw that out there. Anyway, out of all this, we should wrap this thing up. I am David Bloom, co-founder with Daniel Frankel, here with me on Next TMT Talks. We also put out a weekly newsletter called Next TMT. You can get that and get this at nexttmt.com, and that's TMT as in technology, media, and telecom, because that's what we talk about mostly. We can't avoid sports when it dominates what the whole media landscape's about. And so we talk about that. Also, we're sports geeks, so forgive us. But we're interested in the business. If you have tips, let them know, send them along. If you want to sponsor us, we're very happy to talk with you about that. And more generally, you can't beat the price. Brains and criticism and thoughtful views on a wide variety of topics.